The year was 1865, and though the war had ended, the land had not yet learned the meaning of peace. Dawn broke over the frontier in streaks of pale gold, spilling through the mist that drifted low across the valley. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something, perhaps mercy, perhaps reckoning. Elias Ward rode along the dirt path that led from his homestead to the trading post in town, his rifle slung over his shoulder, and his mind heavy with the weight of too many ghosts. The leather of his saddle creaked in rhythm with the steady gait of his horse, and the smell of dew, dust, and wood smoke hung in the air. He had seen enough blood to last a lifetime. The war had left him with a limp in his right leg and a silence that words could never break. But out here, where the world stretched wide and empty, he thought maybe a man could still start over. His wife, Clara, had believed it too. She had built the small house at the edge of the woods with her own hands, painted the shutters, planted the corn, raised their little girl, Lucy, with a kind of hope Elias had long forgotten. Every morning, Clara would hum a tune while hanging laundry on the line, her brown hair catching the sunlight like fire through glass. Elias smiled at the thought, though the smile faded as quickly as it came. The town was changing. Lawmen and drifters shared the same bar, and the promise of gold had brought a different kind of hunger. Rumors rode the wind about outlaws who deserted the war camps and turned to robbing ranchers along the valley. He had heard the names whispered once before, Kane Holt and his men. They were said to move like shadows, killing for coin or whiskey, whichever came first. Elias hoped to God those rumors would stay far from his land. The trading post stood crooked under the rising sun, its wooden sign swaying on rusty hinges. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the scent of leather and gun oil. Men leaned on the counter, their voices low, faces grim. Elias nodded to the barkeep, Tom, a friend from before the war. "Morning, Ward," Tom said, polishing a glass that had seen better days. "Heard you're fixin' the north fence. You'll need more wire come next month." "Maybe," Elias muttered, "if the cattle stay put." From the far end of the room, a voice cut through the quiet. "Heard your woman's been keepin' busy while you're out tendin' them fences." The words were slurred but sharp, spoken by a broad-shouldered ranch hand whose hat sat crooked on his head. Laughter followed, low and mean. Elias turned, jaw tight. "You got something you mean to say?" The man smirked. "Only that maybe you oughta keep a closer eye on your property." His friends chuckled, the kind of laughter that begged for a fight. Elias stepped closer. "You don't talk about my wife." For a moment no one breathed. Then came the unmistakable sound of a hammer cocking back. The barkeep froze, one hand under the counter. Elias's fingers brushed the butt of his revolver, but he didn't draw. The silence stretched until Tom spoke. "That's enough. Ain't nobody dying in my place today." The drunk spat on the floor. "Ain't worth the bullet anyway." He turned and stumbled out, boots scraping against the porch. Elias exhaled slowly, holstered his weapon, and dropped a few coins on the counter. "Keep the change," he said, his voice flat. By the time he reached home, the sun had dipped lower, washing the fields in the orange light of evening. The wind carried the scent of burning oak and the faint, haunting sound of Lucy's laughter. For a moment, peace seemed possible again. Clara was outside, gathering apples that had fallen from the tree near the fence. She looked up when she saw him, her smile soft but tired. "Long day?" she asked. "Long enough." He dismounted, tying the horse to the post. "Trouble in town. Nothing worth bringing home." She studied him, seeing what he didn't say. "You still thinking about the past?" "Past don't think about me," he said, "so I try not to return the favor." Clara smiled faintly. "You can't outrun what made you, Elias, but you can build something that outlasts it." She turned toward the little girl playing with a wooden doll near the oak tree. "Lucy already has." He watched them for a long time, the two of them framed by the golden leaves drifting from the branches above. If there was heaven on this earth, it was this. His wife's laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves, his daughter's giggle echoing through the dusk. But heaven, he knew, was a fragile thing. Night fell quickly that autumn. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of horses in the distance. Clara paused by the fence, frowning. "You expecting someone?" Elias shook his head. "No." From the dark edge of the woods came the flicker of movement, shadows where none should be. Clara's heart quickened. She gathered Lucy in her arms and hurried toward the cabin. The first gunshot split the night. Elias spun toward the sound, instinct firing before thought. He drew his revolver and ran, boots pounding the dirt path. The barn door slammed open. Another shot followed by a scream that cut through him like a blade. Inside the cabin, Clara pressed Lucy under the kitchen table. "Don't move," she whispered. Not a sound. The door burst open, and 3 figures stepped in, faces hidden beneath hats and scarves. "Where's the man?" one growled. Clara stood tall, trembling but unyielding. "You're too late." The man laughed. "Ain't that a shame?" The flash of a pistol lit the room, followed by the thud of a body hitting the floor. Outside, Elias fired blindly into the dark, shouting Clara's name. He reached the doorway as the last of the riders fled into the woods, hooves churning the earth. Smoke curled from the shattered lamp inside. The world narrowed to the sight before him. Clara, lying still beneath the overturned chair, her dress soaked in crimson, her hand outstretched toward the child she protected. Lucy crawled from beneath the table, eyes wide, silent as snowfall. Elias dropped to his knees, gathering Clara in his arms. "No," he whispered over and over, the word breaking apart in his throat. The oak tree outside groaned in the wind, scattering leaves across the threshold like blessings or curses. He carried her outside and laid her beneath that same tree, where the golden leaves fell in a quiet rain. The dawn light crept over the horizon, soft and merciless. Lucy stood beside him, clutching his sleeve. "She said you'd come back," the little girl murmured. Elias looked at the body of the woman who had been his heart, the land that had been his hope, and the child who was now his only reason to breathe. He couldn't speak. The only sound was the wind through the branches, whispering through the valley like a prayer too old to be answered. And when the first leaf fell upon Clara's still face, Elias Ward understood. Peace had never belonged to men like him. The morning after Clara's death came gray and hollow, like the world itself had drawn its final breath. Smoke curled from the ruins of the cabin, twisting upward into a sky stripped of warmth. Elias Ward stood beside the oak, his hat in his hands, eyes fixed on the patch of earth where he'd laid her to rest. The shawl she loved so dearly fluttered from the low branch above, catching the cold wind like a flag of surrender. He had dug the grave with his bare hands until the soil tore his nails and bled his knuckles raw. Lucy watched from the fence line, silent, her doll clutched to her chest. He knelt in the dirt and whispered words that broke apart before they ever reached the air. The war had taught him how to bury man. But this was something else entirely, something sacred and cruel. When he rose, his back ached and his heart burned, but his purpose was carved clean through the pain. Whoever had taken Clara would never see another sunrise. By dusk, he had packed what little remained. A rifle, a canteen, a pouch of bullets, and Clara's wedding ring strung on a leather cord around his neck. Lucy followed him to the horse, her small boots sinking into the mud. "Where are we going, Pa?" "Somewhere I can find the men who did this. I want to come." Her voice trembled. He looked at her, really looked, at the same brown eyes that once smiled up at him from Clara's face. "This ain't a road for children." "I ain't a child," she said, though tears betrayed her. He turned away, tightening the saddle straps. "You'll stay with Mrs. Calhoun in town till I return." But when the night fell and he rode into the wild, he never saw the small figure that slipped from the shadows behind him, following on foot, clutching her mother's shawl. The frontier stretched vast and indifferent beneath the silver moon. For days, Elias tracked the outlaw's trail across canyons and dry riverbeds, the prints faint but fresh. Every mark in the dust spoke their story. 3 horses, heavy loads, one limping slightly. The wind howled through the ravines like a ghost's lament, and each night he lay awake, listening for the sound of hooves that never came. On the 3rd morning, he found her. Lucy sat by a dying fire in an abandoned miner's shack, eyes red, cheeks streaked with dust. The sight near broke him, torn between anger and relief. "Lord, help me. Child, what were you thinking?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I was thinking you shouldn't be alone." Elias stared at her, then sighed. "You're your mother's child, right enough?" He wanted to turn back, but he knew he couldn't. Sending her away now would be as good as losing her too. So he taught her how to ride close, how to keep quiet when danger stirred, how to watch the land for signs of movement. The days bled together, dust storms, hunger, and long stretches of silence broken only by the cry of hawks. They crossed into the broken plains near the Cheyenne border, a land painted in gold and scarlet brush. There he met her, Nora. She appeared out of the mist like something conjured by the land itself, rifle slung across her shoulder, a coyote pelt hanging from her belt. Her skin was sun-browned, her eyes sharp as river glass. "You're far from safe country, stranger," she said, her voice carrying both warning and curiosity. "I'm looking for 3 men," Elias replied. "One with a scar down his cheek. Rode this way 4 nights past." Her gaze flicked to Lucy, then back to him. "Those men killed a trader south of here. Took his horse, his gold, and left him for the crows. You'll find them if you follow the river east." Elias studied her. "You know them." "I knew one once," she said, her jaw tightening. "Kane Holt. He wasn't always a monster, but he learned fast." "Then you'll take me to him." She hesitated. "You sure you want that end? Revenge has teeth. It don't let go easy." "I don't aim for peace," Elias said. "I aim for truth." For 3 days, they rode together through rough country, scrubland, gullies, and silent woods where the crows circled low. Nora moved like a shadow, reading the earth with a hunter's patience. At night, they made camp under the stars, the air thick with the smell of pine and the crackle of burning mesquite. Lucy would curl against Elias's side, and Nora would hum old songs that sounded half memory, half mourning. One night, as the fire burned low, Nora watched Elias clean his rifle. "You think killing them will fill what's gone?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I think it'll stop the bleeding long enough to stand, or maybe it'll tear you open for good." Elias glanced at her. "You speak like you've buried someone too." Her eyes flickered toward the fire. "A brother." Kane saw to that. Silence stretched between them, heavy as smoke. Lucy stirred in her sleep, clutching her mother's shawl. At dawn, they reached the river, a cold, twisting vein cutting through the red earth. Boot prints lined the bank, fresh and deep. Elias crouched, touching the wet soil. "They're close." Nora nodded, but her expression was grim. "They'll know we're following." The first gunshot came before she finished speaking. The bullet struck the ground near Lucy's foot, spraying dust. Elias grabbed her, rolling behind a boulder as more shots cracked through the air. "Stay down," he barked, firing back. The echo thundered through the canyon. Nora darted forward, firing from cover, her movements quick and deadly. The outlaw's laughter echoed from the ridge above. "You're a long way from your farm, soldier," one called. Elias's heart pounded, rage rising like wildfire. He leaned out, fired twice. One cry, one body down. The gunfire ceased. Only the river spoke, whispering over stones. When it was over, they found 2 horses, both riderless, and a blood trail leading east. Elias checked his ammo. 3 bullets left. Lucy trembled, but tried not to show it. "Are they gone, Pa?" He touched her cheek gently. "Not yet." They camped under a hollow ridge that night. The air was cold, and the stars seemed cruelly bright. Nora sat apart, sharpening her knife in silence. Elias stared into the fire, his hands shaking despite the heat. "Why don't you stop?" she asked quietly. "You've got a child who still breathes. Ain't that enough reason to turn back?" Elias looked at her, eyes hollow. "If I stop now, she'll grow up thinking the world lets men like them walk free. I won't have it." Nora's face softened. "Then you best be ready to lose what's left of you." The fire hissed as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and distant thunder. Elias lay awake, listening to the steady breathing of his daughter beside him. Somewhere out there, Kane Holt was still alive, and as the dawn crept over the horizon, Elias made himself a promise. He would end it before the next sunset, or die beside the memory of the woman buried beneath the golden leaves. The morning broke cold and pale, a shroud of mist curling low over the ravine where the outlaw camp lay hidden. Elias Ward crouched behind a stand of rocks, his breath steady, his hand wrapped tight around the worn handle of his rifle. The air smelled of rain and gunpowder, and the silence was the kind that comes before death. Beside him, Nora checked her revolver, her face set in grim focus. Behind them, Lucy waited by the ridge, clutching her mother's shawl like a talisman, her eyes wide but unflinching. "They're down there," Nora whispered. "3 men, 2 sleeping, 1 on watch. If you fire first, we lose the light advantage." Elias nodded. "I'm not waiting for the sun to rise. This ends now." He rose from cover and moved like a shadow through the brush, every step measured, his boots sinking into the damp earth. The sound of horses, shifting in their sleep, drifted through the fog. He could see them now, 3 figures by a dying fire, their rifles stacked beside a tree. One man leaned against a stump, his face half lit by the ember glow. The scar down his cheek gleamed like silver. Kane Holt. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger, but just as he drew breath to fire, Lucy's voice, soft as wind, carried through the mist. "Pa!" The words split the quiet. Kane's head snapped up. "Who's there?" Elias fired. The shot tore through the air, striking the log beside Kane. Chaos erupted. One outlaw went down in a flash of blood and dust. Another scrambled for his gun. Nora charged from the side, her rifle cracking twice in quick succession. A bullet grazed Elias's arm, spinning him back. He fell, rolled, fired again. The world dissolved into noise and smoke, gunfire flashing like lightning against the morning fog. Then it was over. Only one man remained standing, Kane Holt. He held his revolver loosely, eyes locked on Elias. "Didn't think I'd see you again, soldier." His voice was calm, almost curious. "I remember your place. Pretty wife. Shame about her." Elias's heart hammered in his chest. He stepped closer, gun raised, blood dripping from his arm. "You're gonna beg before it's done." Kane laughed, low and cold. "You think I beg? The world don't run on mercy, Ward. It runs on what a man's willing to take." "Then take this," Elias said and fired. The shot missed by an inch, splintering the tree beside Kane's head. The outlaw lunged, grabbing Elias's rifle barrel, wrenching it aside. They crashed together, fists and fury, rolling through the dirt. Kane slammed a knee into Elias's ribs, the wind leaving his body in a ragged gasp. The revolver clattered to the ground. "Where's your God now, soldier?" Kane spat, pinning him down. "Where's that righteous cause?" Elias's hand found a rock. He swung hard. The crack of bones split the air. Kane staggered back, cursing, blood pouring down his face. Elias scrambled to his feet, chest heaving, vision swimming red. He lunged for his revolver, but Kane was faster. The outlaw raised his gun, smiling through broken teeth. "You die like she did," he said. The shot never came. A flash of motion from the ridge, Nora's rifle fired. Kane jerked as the bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him sideways. His gun went off wild, the bullet tearing through the air and grazing Elias's cheek. Before Kane could recover, Elias stepped forward and drove the revolver barrel beneath his chin. "Say her name," he hissed. Kane's sneer faltered. "What good'll that?" The shot echoed through the canyon, silencing him forever. Elias stood there, panting, smoke curling from the muzzle. The wind picked up, scattering the embers from the outlaw's fire, lifting the fallen leaves into a slow, golden dance. Nora approached, wiping the blood from her brow. "It's done." He stared at Kane's body, his voice hollow. "No, it's never done." Behind them, Lucy appeared, her small face pale, her eyes full of something far too old for her years. She didn't cry. She just looked at her father, then at the man on the ground. "Is Mama at peace now?" Elias's throat tightened. He knelt, pulling her close. "She is now, sweetheart." They buried Kane beside the river, where the earth was soft and the air carried no echoes. Nora said a few words in her mother's tongue, something quiet and ancient, and when she finished, the wind seemed to sigh through the trees. They rode for days after, following the long road back to the valley. The storm broke once, drenching them in cold rain that felt like cleansing, though Elias's heart remained heavy. The fire of vengeance had burnt itself out, leaving only ash. Each night, Lucy slept wrapped in her mother's shawl, and each dawn, Elias caught her staring toward the east, where the light rose soft and gold. When they reached the homestead, the land was almost unrecognizable. The fences had fallen, the cabin's roof sagged, and the oak trees stood bare against the gray sky. But the soil was still rich, and the earth still smelled of home. Elias dismounted slowly, his body aching with the memory of every mile. Lucy ran ahead, kneeling beside the grave beneath the oak. She brushed away the leaves that had gathered there. The flowers died, Pa. He joined her, crouching beside mound. Then we'll plant new ones. They worked in silence as Nora fetched water from the stream. The sound of the shovel striking the earth carried a strange rhythm, steady, healing, final. When the last of the seeds was buried, Elias sat back on his heels, staring at the ground that held both his loss and his redemption. Clara always said the land forgives if you give it reason, he murmured. Nora's voice was soft. And will you? He looked at her, then at Lucy. I reckon I'll try. As the sun broke through the clouds, the valley seemed to come alive again. Birds stirred in the trees, and the air filled with the smell of wet leaves and new beginnings. For the first time in months, Elias felt something like peace stir within him. Not the kind a man earns through violence, but the kind he builds one breath at a time. Lucy pressed her palm to the earth. Mama's warm here, she whispered. The sun's keeping her safe. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. She's part of the land now. Every leaf that falls, every breeze that blows, she's in it. Nora watched them quietly, a faint smile crossing her lips. You've still got fight left in you, Ward. Maybe now you'll use it to live. He rose, dusting the dirt from his hands. Maybe I will. They stood together beneath the oak, the golden leaves drifting down around them like blessings. The light turned softer, richer, catching the edges of the world in a glow that felt almost holy. Elias looked out across the field, the land stretching endless before him, and for the first time, the horizon didn't look like a wound. It looked like a promise. He took Lucy's hand. Come on, little one. Let's go home. As they walked back toward the cabin, the wind whispered through the branches above, carrying a voice only the heart could hear. Clara's laughter seemed to linger there, light and fleeting, like sunlight through autumn leaves. And in that fragile sound, Elias Ward understood the truth he had chased across 1,000 miles of grief. Love doesn't end when a body falls. It lingers in the soil, in the wind, in the hearts of those who refuse to forget. He turned once more to the grave beneath the oak, tipping his hat. Rest easy now, he said softly. We'll carry what you left. Then he walked on, his daughter beside him, the golden leaves swirling at their feet, the frontier stretching wide and new beneath the dying light.